Mulder X-Files territory.
Yeah.
I think their main focus has always been to gain control of a large segment of that border fence. New Generation Cartel, as of now, doesn't really have a direct control over it.
President Trump's war on drug trafficking getting even larger in scale, the president declaring cartels as unlawful combatants, paving the way.
What happens when the world's most elusive cartel boss finds himself cornered in the dead of night, surrounded by flashing lights and the deafening roar of helicopters? On October 7, 2025, the tranquil docks of San Pedro exploded into chaos as federal agents closed in on El Mencho, the enigmatic crown prince of the CJNG. Tonight's viral footage reveals the frantic moments when the man known for evading U.S. authorities for years finally faces his reckoning. This is more than just a dramatic chase. It marks a turning point in the global war against organized crime. With the eyes of two nations fixed on Los Angeles Harbor, every second of this historic raid sent shockwaves far beyond the city limits. As the FBI and LAPD unite in a breathtaking pursuit, questions linger. Was this the end of an era or the start of something even bigger? The curtain is about to rise on the untold stories, the seismic aftermath, and the chase that has the internet and the world on edge. New footage circulating on social media appears to capture the elusive figure known as El Mencho attempting to slip away from a police operation. The clip has spread rapidly, becoming a focal point for discussion across platforms as viewers weigh authenticity, motive, and the implications of a high-profile suspect on the move. The setting seems to be a dimly lit street, where a slender line of vehicles presses forward under flashing lights and the distant rumble of sirens. Shadows cling to facades, and a few pedestrians pause, their attention drawn by the sudden urgency in the scene. In the center of the frame, a dark SUV accelerates, tires squealing as officers converge from both directions. From the first frame, the footage communicates a clash between speed and restraint. The driver appears to search for an opening, glancing at mirrors, calculating angles, and choosing a path that might offer a brief escape before the cordon tightens. The audio carries the hum of engines, the rasp of radios, and the crisp crackle of commands transmitted over the airwaves. Taken together, these elements frame the moment as more than a chase. They present a controlled operation under public scrutiny, a routine tactic amplified by a viral audience. Observers disagree on the identity of the person behind the wheel. Some outlets and viewers contend that the silhouette matches descriptions long associated with El Mencho, the leader of a criminal network that has dominated headlines for years. Others urge caution, noting the limits of a single frame, the possibility of misdirection, or even miscaptioned footage from a prior incident presented as new. Even when the figure is not confirmed, the clip functions as a case study in how quickly a moment can metastasize into a national conversation about crime, security, and the legitimacy of leadership within violent organizations. The broader context matters. El Mencho, a name tied to a sprawling cartel network, has been the target of extensive investigations and sustained law enforcement pressure across multiple jurisdictions. Analysts point to the operational challenges of pursuing a moving target, the risks of civilian exposure, and the evolving methods by which criminal groups adapt to intensified surveillance. The video, in this sense, becomes a mirror for ongoing debates about strategy, resources, and the balance between deterrence and escalation in the fight against organized crime. In the days after it surfaced, the clip has sparked questions about platform responsibility, media literacy, and the reliability of user-generated content. Experts caution that sensational frames thrive in feeds designed for rapid engagement, and that viewers should seek corroboration from multiple sources before drawing conclusions. The dialogue around the footage also underscores the power and peril of online transparency. A minute of footage can prompt policy discussions, shape public perception, and influence risk assessments for security authorities. As the clip continues to circulate, questions linger about where and when it was recorded, who filmed it, and what authorities know about the context. The moment invites careful scrutiny of timing, authentication, and the potential strategic aims behind releasing such material. Whatever the investigative outcome, the video stands as a contemporary reminder of how viral media can refract a single encounter into a wider narrative about crime, leadership, and the fragility of public order. The footage remains under examination while audiences watch, compare, and reassess what they thought they understood about a figure whose notoriety continues to echo beyond the border. The moment also invites scrutiny of law enforcement tactics and civilian safety during rapid pursuits. Journalists and researchers emphasize the importance of corroborating sightings with official statements to avoid amplifying misinformation. For viewers seeking clarity, patience and critical evaluation remain essential as new details emerge from investigations and official briefings. The story is evolving, and audiences wait patiently. The 6 subsets carved out their own fiefdoms within the Rancho San Pedro network, each a sinew in a body that stretched beyond the docks and into the city's pulse. The Harbor Wing, nicknamed for the fleet of crates, cranes, and cargo routes that fed the empire's heartbeat. It steered every shipment, every container, every whisper of a suspicious manifest. The Shadow, an intelligence cell that fed the operation with information, double agents, and coded signals. It kept secrets tight and masked the true reach of the cartel's influence. The bridges, the transportation arm that moved money and merchandise through a maze of legal fronts and back channels. They kept the flow steady, whatever the weather on the surface.
Sinaloa Cartel Federation now has an element within it that has allied themselves with his cartel.
The Hand, enforcers who kept rivals at bay and loyalty intact, enforcing rules with an unflinching code and a readiness to act when the price of betrayal rose. The Ledger, money and front businesses, the dressed-up face of the operation. Banks, shell companies, restaurants, and real estate, proof that profit traveled with a license and a smile. The Crown, leadership by design, the strategic mind that stitched every fragment into a single plan. In the shadows, this was the nerve center, the decision point from which every order radiated. Investigator A, quiet, precise. Each subset thought in terms of territory and leverage. But their strength was not brute force alone. It was cohesion, a shared creed that kept the gears turning even when one piece came under pressure. We mapped the web in layers: the docks, the streets, the businesses, the money trails. The 6 subsets weren't separate. They were converging lines that fed a single engine. As surveillance deepened, the true scale began to surface. The networks that threaded through legal facades and illicit pockets alike. The way fear and business blended until you could not tell where one began and the other ended. The night of the raid unfolded like a carefully composed sentence, each clause leading to the next with no wasted word. We moved with a plan that respected every jurisdiction's rules, every chain of command. It wasn't about one city, one agency. It was about a shared memory of what the CJNG had built here. In a warehouse along the harbor's edge, the crown prince of the cartel, El Mencho's most trusted figure in this region, found his web closing in. Agents swept in with precision, their presence a final punctuation mark on years of intelligence work. The confrontation was restrained, intentional. A warrant, a tense moment of standoff, and then a ripple of compliance. El Mencho was detained, not alone, but surrounded by officers who carried the weight of a decade's pursuit on their shoulders. Behind the scenes, prosecutors peeled back the layers, the 6 subsets, their territories, their rules, one by one, translating whispers into charges, fear into testimony, influence into indictments. Analysts, soft but weighted. What changes now isn't a single victory, it's a recalibration. The illicit infrastructure wasn't built in a day, and it won't collapse in a single night, but the balance has shifted, and the response revolves around that shift. Across border offices and international liaison rooms, the ripple effects were felt as quickly as the sirens faded. The case pushed forward digital forensics, cross-border data sharing, and coordinated prosecutions that no longer stopped at city limits or national lines. The city exhaled in a new way, measuring the difference between fear and relief, between the old order and the possibility of a robust, continuing fight against a network that had grown too large to ignore. Closer. The arrest didn't just remove a figure from the street. It tested every assumption about how this empire functioned, who benefited, and who paid the price. The crown's fall began a countdown toward courtroom battles, asset seizures, and the long work of dismantling the undercurrents that kept the cartel alive. Yet, as the harbor woke to daylight, the real work of turning the momentum into lasting change began. Investigators would trace every ledger, follow every shipment, cross every boundary, until the 6 subsets no longer held the same grip on the region. The next chapter is already taking shape, from the evidence rooms to the courtroom floors, from financial subpoenas to new alliances in law enforcement, while the world watches how quickly AVIL structures can bend to a law and order response. The dawn over San Pedro felt like a turning point, a chance to redraw the map of influence in the drug trade landscape. And as the tide pooled at the pilings, whispers of what comes next began to circle the docks, a hint that the investigation's roots would push upward, outward, and inward in ways no one could predict. Ahead lay the courtroom, the asset trails, and the new alliances that would redefine the fight. The camera shift to the next, behind-the-scenes chapters, where power, money, and accountability intersect in the days to come. Behind prison walls, the Mexican mafia's reach extended through a web of assistance networks, court-appointed lawyers, corrupt city contractors, and cash flowing through venues nobody wanted to name aloud. The revelation that the gang operated as a single, disciplined enterprise, pushing commands through coded messages tucked inside ordinary conversations, made the investigators realize they weren't just chasing a gang. They were chasing a logistics empire, a system that could weather hits on the street if the money kept moving, if the books remained balanced. In the days that followed, the precincts and the courthouses hummed with a new tempo. The courtroom became a theater of ledger lines and testimony rather than bullets and sirens, and the asset trails took center stage. Prosecutors opened a deck of exhibits that looked ordinary at first glance. Canceled checks, transfer records, insurance policies, documents that, on the surface, could belong to any small business owner faced with a mortgage and payroll.
We won't harm anyone except for those that deserve it. If you deserve it, you better hide, because we will call.
But the summaries beneath those pages drew a different map. Millions siphoned through shell companies, real estate purchased with cash, vehicles registered under fronts that never truly existed outside the paperwork. The money, as investigators explained in measured tones, flowed toward the hands of incarcerated leaders who could not be touched directly, yet whose orders dictated every move on the street. Ahead lay the courtroom, the asset trails, and the new alliances that would redefine the fight. The cameras shift to the next behind-the-scenes chapters, where power, money, and accountability intersect in the days to come. What began to surface was less a single conspiracy than a layered operation. The two divisions, composed entirely of women, once overlooked in the broader narrative, emerged as pivotal nodes in the organization's financial backbone. They weren't simply foot soldiers. They were the keepers of what the old men called precision liquidity, the careful dispersal of funds to ensure every branch stayed solvent, every obligation paid, every rival kept at bay. In a chillingly efficient way, those women kept the machinery oiled, translating coded directives into concrete actions, siphoning profits from drug shipments, channeling payments to corrupt intermediaries, then returning a portion to the core leadership with a ritualistic cadence that suggested loyalty as much as fear. The court heard how the mafia treated these business units as separate entities, each with its own leadership and payroll, yet all reporting to the same shadow board that existed nowhere in the daylight and everywhere in the money trail. The defense oscillated between disbelief and denial. Challenge the provenance of a single transfer, and you could unravel the entire chain. But the ledger held its own stubborn truth. The same names appeared across disparate fronts. The same pattern recurred in real estate investments, and the same money returned, sometimes through a maze of legitimate-looking deals, to the people who could not be prosecuted without threatening the entire structure. Meanwhile, investigators decoded another layer, the operational doctrine that tied the Rancho San Pedro crew not merely to the Mexican Mafia's present network, but to a broader ecosystem of corrupt practices. Kickbacks from construction projects, protection money from legitimate business owners, and a system of taxes that functioned as both revenue and insurance. The operation's reach extended into the administrative shadows, municipal contractors, and a handful of local executives who understood the cost of stepping out of line and the price of stepping back in when the longer game demanded it. As the indictments rolled out, so did the concerns about collateral damage and the potential for violence to erupt if the case did not proceed with the care of a surgical strike. The prosecutors argued that the mob's financial infrastructure was precisely the kind of backbone that kept violence operative in parallel with commerce. Remove the leadership from the street, they suggested, and you disrupt not just knuckles and silences, but the entire flow of money that makes violence cheap and frequent. The asset trail presentation yielded something more than numbers. It offered a narrative that connected the docks to the banks, the warehouses to the crypto laundering whispers, and the loan approvals to the fear that kept rivals at bay. A ledger entry, a real estate transfer, a payment to a shell company in a jurisdiction with lax regulatory oversight, each line a thread that, when pulled, threatened to loosen the whole sweater of the enterprise. The defense pressed to limit the scope, to keep the thread from pulling the tapestry apart, insisting that some transactions were legitimate, some were merely peripheral, and some were not the business of the federal court at all. The judge, listening with careful restraint, reminded both sides that the truth here would not be elegant or simple, and that complexity itself would become part of the evidence. In the mix stepped the new alliances that would redefine the fight. A former rival gang member, once known for sharp instincts on the street, agreed to testify in exchange for a lighter sentence in a different case. His admission that lines were drawn not just by loyalty to a name, but by the debt owed to the mafia's financial architecture shook the room with quiet gravity. He wasn't offering a victory speech, he was offering a map. The prosecutors pressed this map with a cool demand for specificity, names, dates, distributions. The informant provided a sequence, and a pattern emerged that allowed investigators to begin threading together the most elusive link: who was moving the money in real time, and who stood to gain most from its concealment. On the other side, the defense argued for the gravity of trust and the possibility that some participants were muscle rather than masterminds, a line that drew amused glances from the gallery and a chorus of careful nods from judges who understood that complexity is the enemy of certainty, and certainty is what keeps juries at bay. Yet, as the weeks stretched into months, the money trails began to align with the testimonies, and the court watched as a more complete picture formed, an enterprise that looked ordinary from the outside, an everyday economy of risk and reward, yet inside was bound by a rigid code, a tax system that the street could not escape, and leadership that spoke as one even when its members operated across different divisions. The investigative arm did not stop with the indictment. They broadened the scope to assess the impact of the case on the city's fragile balance, a balance that depended on the stealth of a few honest brokers who could still break open a bank account or two without triggering a flare in the night.
Lots of weapons. What is this weapon here?
It's a 40-millimeter grenade launcher. This is modern warfare. We use war technologies.
They mapped out the service chain. Who bought protection, who sold it, where the profits vanished into the fictions that keep a city's gray economy from becoming a bright, obvious target. And they kept a cautious eye on the new alliances outside the courtroom, the counterparts in other jurisdictions, the private sector witnesses with inside knowledge, and the international threads that could tether the local operation to a much larger, more insidious machine. The days to come promised more chapters in this unfolding documentary of crime, power, and accountability. There would be more court appearances, more seized assets, and more disclosures about the way the Mexican mafia's apparatus operated from the shadows to influence the daylight world. There would be the slow, careful work of turning defenses into admissions, and admissions into sentences that sought not just vengeance, but deterrence and a durable interruption of a system that had learned to bend the law to its will. And always somewhere behind the scenes, the docks and the warehouses, the bank ledgers and the courtroom benches, there lingered a question that this operation would not let go. If the upper echelon could be dismantled, what would rise to take its place? The next chapter would answer, but for now, the investigation pressed forward with a patient, relentless cadence, tracing every footfall of influence, every whisper that traveled through the chain of command, every doorway through which money and fear could pass, and every alliance that could dodge the light long enough to keep the machine humming, until the next knock came at the door. A new clip appears on screens around the world, a fragment of street life amplified by the speed of the internet. It arrives with sirens in the distance and headlights cutting through dusk. Then enters a chase that feels both immediate and detached from the events that produced it. Viewers ask if what they see is real, staged, or somewhere in between. This moment blurs the line between frontline reporting and social media narrative, and every frame carries what people believe about danger, authority, and the figure at the center. The sequence unfolds in a cityscape at dusk, with a convoy moving through traffic under the glow of street lamps. A sedan with darkened windows squeezes between larger vehicles while police cars trail in careful formation. The camera work is rough, the angles tremble, and the audio carries a dry, metallic wash that makes the scene feel immediate. From a distance, bystanders react with disbelief and fear, a reminder that such moments are often about perception as much as fact. Authorities and independent observers have identified the figure in the footage as Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes, widely known as El Mencho, a leading figure of a cartel operating in parts of western Mexico. The claim, while not verified everywhere, anchors the clip in a broader story about influence, escape, and the elusive reach of a leadership figure whose image can galvanize fear and notoriety. If authentic, the moment would offer a rare glimpse into a high-stakes chase that rarely presents itself to ordinary cameras outside official channels. Across social feeds, commentators debate the reliability of each frame, the potential for miscaptioning, and torrents of rumors that follow viral clips. Some viewers emphasize the human cost of such pursuits, noting the risk to officers and bystanders and the individuals who become collateral in the theater of pursuits. Others focus on the symbolic impact, what it means when a figure associated with violence acts with fear, and how that moment shapes sense of authority. In many posts, the line between street footage and propaganda blurs without clear resolution. Historians of media and crime note how such clips function as modern folklore, circulating, mutating with each share, crystallizing opinions about who is in control and who is endangered. Verification trails become secondary to immediacy, and algorithms reward the most dramatic frames. Newsrooms race to corroborate, place the events in context, and acknowledge uncertainty with restraint. In that tension lies the modern challenge of storytelling, to convey what happened, to explain why it matters, and to do so in a way that respects the real consequences for real people. Beyond the glare of screens, communities caught in the ripple effects of such footage brace for another wave of rumors, police advisories, and social media conversations about legitimacy and power. Local authorities increasingly emphasize verified information, urging viewers to await official statements and to resist sensational captions that may mislead. The viral moment also serves as a reminder of the fragile boundary between public interest and sensationalism, a boundary that shifts with each retweet and each new clip. The story, for now, remains fluid, with investigators reviewing angles, timelines, and sources. From this point, views look to the next update, the official clarification, and the ongoing narrative that tries to make sense of a chase captured in public view. What begins as a single video fragment expands into a broader discussion about accountability, media ethics, and the responsibilities of platforms that host rapidly shared content. As verification catches up, the discussion shifts toward lessons learned and questions from communities seeking safety and transparency in a world where a single frame can echo across continents. The next segment will examine how authorities verify authenticity and what steps follow in the official response.